Hello, and welcome to the OSF for Organizations webinar that will be running for the next half hour with some time for Q&A. I'll be discussing tools for academic librarians and research support staff alongside my two colleagues who are also here in this live webinar, Gretchen Giggin and Teresa Vo. If you have any questions about anything throughout the webinar, please ask them in the Q&A section of the webinar so that we can keep track of those questions and ask them. As folks trickle in here, I'll just repeat, please ask questions in the Q&A. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the regular chat. My colleagues will help answer questions as I run through the content of the webinar, and there'll be some time at the end for questions if you have them. And I'll just do a little admin here at the top of the meeting. So if you have inquiries and you want to put in information that might not necessarily be for me or for Gretchen, but maybe for a different team, you can go to our contact us page at any time and put in some details about what what you need to know or questions you may have. And I get those and I direct them to the right people. If you have specific questions about setting up some of our paid services, so that includes institutions, preprints, registries, you can email me at nadia@cos.io. If you have questions about an existing service that you already pay for your institution or your organization or research group, you can email Gretchen@cos.io. And you may already have an email with Gretchen going, but feel free to email her again. She's also here in this chat and can answer questions. Okay, so Teresa, if you could just launch a quick Zoom survey while I'm talking, just to get a sense of what everybody's familiarity is with the OSF who is here. This survey will allow us to, or allow me to kind of understand a bit better, where you're coming from, if you have an OSF account, if you're familiar with OSF institutions. And this poll will just be running in the background. But for the most part, this webinar will be relevant, whether or not you are familiar or are not familiar with the OSF or our paid tools. And also, if you are just a researcher who is interested in some of these tools for your institution, or your institution is already a member and you're interested in how it works, that's also fine. And this poll will help us understand a little bit more about that. So if you have questions about any of the products that I'll be talking about today, you can find links to the costs of those products, the features and functionality of those products on cos.io/tools. So feel free to check that out as I speak throughout the webinar. If you have just questions about the OSF in general, you can also find answers to those questions on our product page. And so I'll just give you a very brief overview of kind of how the OSF works. This is what the Open Science Framework, or the OSF, looks like. You can interact in three primary ways on the OSF by working in what we call project spaces, registrations, or preprints. You can think of these variably as workflows. On the OSF, we also refer to them as objects that you can publish. They all engage with and utilize our OSF metadata schema. If you have questions about that, we have some really great resources both in our help guides. We've had some great metadata webinars that Gretchen has actually run, and those are available. And if you want to find them, Gretchen can direct you to them. But one thing to note about the OSF is that the OSF is free, and that it is free for individual users. And anybody can create an account. They can link their ORCID ID or sign up through their ORCID ID if they'd like. If their institution is already a member, they can sign up through their institution's SSO service. That will never be there will never be a paywall around that. So for individual users, whether they are affiliated with an institution, might be your institution, might not be, that the use of the OSF is free. And these are the three primary ways at the moment that you can engage with the OSF: create material, make it public, and share it. So I'll talk about projects on the OSF. These are very flexible workspaces. People use them for lots of different purposes, for sharing experimental data, for creating a kind of homepage for lab, or for a research project that has material in lots of different places, online or in other repositories. Projects really allow you to plan, collaborate, organize a research study along a continuum from private to public. They're really a good place for a team to kind of show their work, refine ideas. I think of it as a sandbox or a centralized workspace where you can organize data and materials and information in one place. If a project is public, you can get a DOI, and you can remove and add collaborators to a project. You can also modify privacy settings and add and remove components or subcomponents of a project. There's also activity logs on a project and versioning as well. Project features that are one of the reasons why it's one of the more popular workflows on the OSF include the ability to collaborate with anybody, whether or not they have an institutional affiliation or not, the ability to set fine-grained permissions, to license your projects in lots of different ways. There's actually a licensing webinar coming up next week that I'm going to lead to talk about licensing on the OSF. You can utilize our robust metadata schema, which we've run a couple of really amazing webinars on, as I mentioned, and you can find more information about that both in our help guides and other documentation. For projects, you can mint DOIs for if they're public. You can sync your ORCID record with your OSF content, and the OSF is open, and you can use our API to propagate any data or metadata from our database, from the OSF database. So that's one type of object on the OSF. There's another, which is called registrations. Some of you may be familiar with registrations. They're variably utilized in different disciplines and different research communities. Some have been using and utilizing registrations and pre-registrations for a long time. Some are newer to the practice. Uh, Fundamentally, what they are time-stamped archived objects on the OSF or on another registry. A very common or commonly recognized registry is clinicaltrials.gov. These registrations outline research and analysis plans, study plans, prior to starting a study. There's lots of different types of registrations, and we support the use of a lot of different types of templates that are a part of these different types of registrations. And one of the features of registrations on the OSF is that you can create one from scratch using some of the templates that we offer, or you can essentially fork an existing OSF project and pull pull metadata and files from that parent project or component into that registration. So there's two ways of creating it. And on the OSF, registrations are permanent objects, so they can't be deleted. There's a limited number of updates that you can make to that registration. We do have indicators on registrations as to whether or not you have linked supplementary material, linked outputs, linked data, linked code. If you have questions about the different types of templates, for example, within registrations, if you have questions about, scoping reviews on the OSF or systematic reviews on the OSF, which both can be done using a registration, please reach out to us. We have a lot of resources around registrations on the OSF to help you. And so OSF institutions is a way to take registrations and projects and preprints, which I didn't discuss at length, but I'll just say that preprints on the OSF are fairly straightforward objects. They're PDFs with associated metadata, so very similar to preprints that you would find on any other repository or preprint service. The OSF has preprints. And OSF institutions allows for the aggregation of all of those three objects: preprints, registrations, and projects, onto one affiliated page. So how that works is that when your institution decides it wants to become a member, you'd speak to me, you'd speak to Gretchen and other members of our product team to set up single sign-on, so that there's an institutional login to the OSF, and that allows for the aggregation of projects, preprints, and registrations from users who utilize that single sign-on onto an institutional page. It makes all the research visible in one place. And not only do projects and registrations appear on a landing page, but institutional branding also appears on all the associated projects, preprints, and registrations. So anyone who's visiting those project pages or preprint pages or registration pages then immediately sees and knows that that researcher is affiliated with that institution. What it's doing in terms of metadata is adding the ROR institutional identifier to the metadata that's associated with those projects and registrations and preprints, and then that then gets shared in lots of other places like DataCite and ORCID. Makes it easier to aggregate all of the material from your community in one place. We also work with you to provide like support and materials to make the process seamless of creating notifications and communication with your community, so that they know they can sign into the OSF via single sign-on, and have their research that is perhaps already on the platform, or new research that they might publish on the platform, to make sure that it all gets affiliated with your institution. We also have an onboarding process, which includes an initial training. That's a part of the OSF institution service. We have significant discounts for group training. That's a part of the OSF institution service. And we also are rolling out a program to provide individual self-paced training licenses to users from institutions. OSF Registries is another tool that, similarly to OSF Institutions, aggregates material, but does this with moderation and submission control. So similarly to an OSF institutional page, there's an institutional page. Oops, this one got a little bit squished. Sorry about that. There's an organizational page for the registry. In this case, you can see here, this is the DOM registry. It's a public registry for grantees registrations as part of this funder, the DOM Foundation. And this raises the profile of all of their research within the registry. And submission control within the registry means that anybody who submits a registration to the registry has to go through an administrative review or moderation process. So administrators on a registry can, approve, provide feedback, or reject submissions to the registry. And that registry link can also be public or private. So it can be open to the entire research community, or can only be open to a specific community that you provide that link to. Registrations also can be created in a custom fashion for OSF registries. So we have a number of registration templates that are available across the OSF for use by anybody. But if you have a specific template that you'd like to build out for OSF for your registry, we can work with you to do that for an additional small cost. Any registration submitted to a registry are then given an affiliate indicator. So visitors to a registration, for example, can then trace the contributors and projects back to your collection of registrations. I'll talk a little bit about OSF preprints. So OSF fairly recently, within the past year, stopped accepting generalized preprint submissions, and stopped essentially providing the functionality of a generalist preprint service. So you can no longer now, as a user, just publish a preprint on the OSF. It must be submitted to a branded preprint service. You can see here as an example, this is SOCH Archive, one of our larger preprint services that we support. There are many other preprint services that use our infrastructure to support their community moderated and operated preprint services. If you're interested in standing one up, we have a pricing structure that's based on the number of submissions. It starts off at $999 a year for up to 100 submissions. So if you're operating a smaller preprint service, it's a more affordable way to stand up and support the preprint service. Oops. I'll talk a little bit about interoperability, which is one of the primary draws to the OSF and in particular to our project workflow. You're able on the OSF to link to files, data, material that you may have in other locations in the cloud, like Google Drive or OneDrive. And you can make sure that within a project, you add material that to the project that may exist in other places. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of users like to use the project workflow to connect material that they may have in other places. I'll talk a little bit about a use case of affiliation, which is one of the primary reasons why institutions sign up for our OSF institutions service. You can see here, University of British Columbia is an institution. On the upper left-hand of the screen there, you can see what an affiliated institution looks like on a project. They have their logo there, UBC, affiliated with that specific project DOI. On the left, you can see what it looks like when a preprint has an affiliated institution. In this case, there are two, Princeton University and UBC. And you can see on the right what it looks like when a preprint is affiliated with both a preprint service, in this case, SciArchive. You can see that logo in the upper left, but then also some of its authors have affiliated institutions, UBC and Princeton University. When we send out these slides, you'll be able to click through and see what UBC associated registrations look like and how those registrations, projects, and preprints then appear, for example, in DataSite Commons. Oops. So when you become an OSF institutional member, as well as have an OSF registration, or excuse me, OSF registry or collection or preprint service, there are some metrics reporting that's done. And specifically for OSF institutions, there's a metrics dashboard that provides real-time API pulled data for you to look at, including things like total users, active users, public and private projects, total file counts, total storage. And then you can also drill down into users and projects, registrations, and preprints and export that data in lots of different ways. For all of our services, we also have quarterly reporting, which provides a little bit more of a long-term understanding of different trends in page views, in total projects over time. And Gretchen sits down with you and provides the ability to sit down and chat through what this means in terms of how your service is being utilized, both by researchers on the platform and by viewers of that material. There's a lot of different use cases of OSF institutions, as well as our other services like OSF registries and preprints. I'm not focusing on OSF collections today, just in the interest of time, but if you do have questions about that, please do reach out to me. We have a couple of case study examples. We have many of them on cos.io that you can find. But one of the ones that I like to highlight in the webinar is Virginia Commonwealth University. It's been a long time user of the OSF institutions service, or they've been members of that service for a long time. And as champions of it, they've also integrated some of the workshops and training that we've provided around OSF institutions into on-campus courses, including what they call a data science lab and data science courses for grad students, which require the use of the OSF and then encourage, and because of that, lay the foundation for the utilization of OSF within the grad schools. at VCU. So we have more information there that you can click through when we pass through these slides to you. So just to recap what membership for OSF institutions includes, it includes an institutional page where all the affiliated preprints, registrations, and projects can be found and are auto-aggregated from users who utilize the single sign-on when they log on to the OSF. So there's that auto-affiliation of public material. They can also remove affiliation if they'd like as well. Um, there's a help desk prioritization for all of your users. There's a dedicated member services manager who answers all of your questions and helps with a demo and onboarding for whatever group of people you'd like. There's an admin metrics dashboard, which allows you to engage with projects, for example, to a certain extent in a data curation capacity. There's real-time data there that you can pull for whatever reporting needs you have. There's also these quarterly longitudinal metrics reports, as I mentioned. You also have access to working groups and the ability to provide feedback on feature development, which is one of the beneficial parts of being a part of our OSF institutions community. And you have a 25% discount on COS group training. So this is training that you might want to pull together for, up to 40 people per training. And it can be scheduled at any time. There's a list of training topics that we offer, and you can work to pick and mix whatever makes sense given your needs. So for institutional members, anybody from their institution who wants to set up a group training gets a significant discount. And some of the questions that we can answer in those trainings are, it spans, there's a gamut of questions there. How can I make my research open? How can I integrate tools on the OSF? How can I make my research reproducible? How can this help my career? What are some daily actions that I can do to make my research more reproducible, et cetera? So taking a step back again for OSF institutions, which again is single sign-on, affiliation, and auto-aggregation of material on the OSF, the annual service pricing for that is $4,999 USD annually. For registries, it's $5,000 a year, and preprints are tiered pricing. So if you have questions about any of that pricing, just feel free to reach out to me. You'll also be getting a follow-up email after this webinar with some links so that you can set up a call to chat with me. You can speak to my colleagues. You can ask any questions you may have. I'll just leave this up here as I leave a little bit of time for questions. I have not looked at any of the questions, so I will go here and see if there are any. Oh, there don't seem to be any questions. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.